I told the grocer meeting that I'll be presenting on this topic, and he said, so are you considering marriage? Why is a celibate talking about marriage? It's one thing I'm talking about monasticism, but of course, I mean, he was joking, and he was saying, you know, one of the greatest church fathers, right, who spoke about marriage was a celibate bishop, St. John Chrysostom. His homilies on marriage, beautiful, beautiful homilies. I mean, you would wonder, wow, how does he know about what's happening in married life? Was he ever married? How does he know? This is the discernment of the saints. This is the illumination that the saints have. You know, keep in mind, you don't have to have cancer to be an oncologist, right? I mean, you don't have to, you know, have the disease itself to cure or treat a disease. Same way, and you'll find in this presentation that marriage and monasticism are just two different roads which leads to the same destination, right? It's two different roads which leads to the same destination. So before we explore what marriage is and what monasticism is, we may have our own understanding in our mind what marriage is and what monasticism is. So let's begin by asking the question, why do people get married? People are laughing. It's like, I'm still wondering why I got married.
Actually,
Why do people get married?
the audience said parents.
Why do people get married? I'm not saying why you got married to your spouse, but in general, why do people get married? Sorry? Age. Is that what you said?
No, I understand the companionship.
Companionship. Companionship. Okay, okay. Companionship. Yes.
I think, you know, in the creation, that's how God meant it, right? So, asks people to be fruitful and multiply.
Be fruitful and multiply. We'll talk about that. Okay. God intended marriage. To a certain degree, I agree. Yes, yes. Okay, we'll talk about that, what being fruitful and multiply meant when he said that.
Come closer to God.
To come closer to God. Okay, all right. So marriage, people get married to come closer to God. Okay, all right. That's definitely an option. Absolutely, sure. Not burn with passion. St. Paul talks about that in Corinthians. Yes. You know, he says, you know, it is my opinion that you all be celibates, but so that you will not fall into temptations and passions, I allow you to get married. That's his opinion, right? Okay, not to burn with passions, yes. Yes.
Well, that's just what we do.
It's what we do. Excellent. Good. So what does that mean? What is it?
That's what my parents did, their parents did, their parents did.
Absolutely. You finish your undergrad, you find a job, you find someone to live with. Yes? That's basically how it works.
I'm not saying that's what I did.
It's what we were taught. Yeah, it's what we were taught. Yeah, absolutely. The expectations of society, right? It's like, in fact, once you get a job, people in our church start asking, so, when is the next sacrament, huh? Right? Do you have some, sorry, did the light go on?
For your.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's the practical next step that needs to take place right in our life. Okay, yes.
That's just somebody, I think there was a couple that, you know, and you all might know people, they lived together before marriage, that seems to be the new thing. So they were getting married, and I was asking them, why do you want to get married? You all already live together. They said, tax deduction.
Yes. Absolutely. Show the person as a dependent, right? Another response that I heard, green card. You know, I mean, they were honest. Like, some people just want a green card. Why else? Yes. Huh? Love. Okay. Sure. Something that's obvious.
I come right there.
Come back to Agape love. Agape love. Okay. Why else? Sure. Love's definitely a response. Why else?
Like to start kind of like your lineage.
Okay. So you wanna continue on your lineage? Yes. Your family name. To continue on your family name. Absolutely. Sure. That's definitely part of it. Yeah.
Somehow you get to learn to be Christ-like.
Somehow you get to learn about to be
To
Christ-like.
be Christ-like.
Okay, that's in marriage.
In marriage.
But did you know that you will be that before getting married?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Have a patience.
Okay. All right. So perhaps to cultivate virtues. Okay. To help to be a better person, perhaps through marriage. Okay. All right. I saw another hand up. Anyone else? Why do people get married?
To have a lifelong partner.
To have a lifelong partner. Okay. Somebody who you could share your life with. Somebody that you could grow old with. Yes. Absolutely. Sure. So there are multiple reasons as to why that we choose to get married. Let's find out what God intends in marriage. Okay. This is the book of Genesis, chapter 2. One of the simple stories that we have been explaining to our kids since kindergarten, right? Yes. Okay. So Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden and to tend it and keep it. Right? And God created everything. He created the whole universe. The last thing that He created was what? Yes, of course. But after all, He created the animals and the plants and trees and everything. He created Adam. Yes? And then He created Eve. But before He created Eve, He looked at Adam and said, there's something wrong here, or something's missing here. He said, this is God saying, quote unquote, God's words. It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Okay? These are his words. Let's tap into God's mind for a moment. Church Father says that's very dangerous. Don't do that. But let's just speculate for a moment. What was going through God's mind? When He looked at Adam, He said, it is not good that man should be alone. And it's funny what He says. He said, He didn't say man should never be alone. He said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Why do you think He said that? What? Adam was bored? Adam was bored out of his mind. He had nothing to do. Okay. All right. He was bored. Yes?
I guess that opens the door for a person to work out their salvation on their own.
Okay. To work out, to help a person to work out his salvation. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Maybe sort of.
Maybe I would think that having another person helps you recognize your own weaknesses and grow as a person.
Okay. To help, to have it's funny, a helper comparable to him. In other words, a person alongside you to help you realize your weaknesses and your strengths and stuff. Okay, absolutely. I heard somebody making a remark. Yes, Andy. He didn't want him to be alone. Okay, all right. He didn't want him to feel lonely, right? With all the trees and animals and plants and everything, he still felt that he's going to be alone. Okay, all right. Yes?
What if God just started getting annoyed with that?
It's like, I don't want him to deal with me anymore, right? Just him and his wife, right? Sure. Let somebody else deal with this problem. Okay, good. These are all good answers. But think from a very practical way. Let's take the bird's eye view. The whole universe is entrusted to Adam. Okay? This includes animals, plants, trees, everything. In fact, before the fall, the church fathers said, if Adam were to call one of the animals and say, hey, come over here and sit here, he would do it. Because he is the crown of creation. Right? He's made in the image of God. The glory of God is in Adam. He is in charge of the entire universe. And God looked at him and said, he needs somebody else. What's going through his mind? Yes. He will become prideful. In other words, God looked at him and said, if you feel that yes, I gave all the gifts and the whole universe to him to take care of. And if one moment, if he feels that Forget God. I'm the king of the jungle here. I'm in charge of this whole entire place. So I am God. What's going to creep into his heart? Pride. And that will destroy his relationship with whom? With God. Marriage, my friends, is a path towards humility. Right? So that we will not become prideful, God gave us a companion. To basically, to put it in our terms, to knock some sense onto the other person. And say, hey, you're not that great. I mean, to put it bluntly, because we sometimes say that, hey, I'm in charge here, okay? I'm the one who's making the money. I'm the one who has the greatest job, okay? I'm the one who's doing most of the work, so I will make all the decisions in this world. And for you as well, all right? You be quiet, you sit on the corner, right? You know where your place is, right? Well, that's where God foresaw all this, right? And said, it's not good that he's alone. He needs somebody else there to help him out, or help her out as well. It's not just for him, but also for her as well, right? If you look at the marriage ceremony, towards the end, it's funny, it says, if she is hungry, feed him, right? If she is naked, clothe her. Children, you need a lot of compassion. You need to be very gentle and kind. So through that process, through marriage, you cultivate virtues. You cultivate humility, love, compassion, mercy. Okay? So that's why God looked at him and said, it's not good that he's by himself. Right? So what does it say? Now after God created Eve, it says, in the flesh of my flesh she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. Okay? Not the wife leaving, but the man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Okay? Now this is what the church father says, that this is a reflection of the Holy Trinity. Because God the Son left his Father and joined himself to his wife. Who was that? The church. The church. So the model of marriage is what Christ did to the church, to his wife. That's the model at which Adam and Eve should function. So why the man? Because Christ takes up the role of the bridegroom. Yes? And who is the bride? You and I. You and I. When we say the church, don't think of people who wear black with hats. Okay? Church, you and I. We are the church. Christ married us. It's even correct to say Christ married me. Okay? So let's remember that marriage is defined not by what Republicans and Democrats say about marriage. Marriage is already defined for us as Orthodox Christians, and is defined by the relationship of Christ with his church. Okay? So this is just from the book of Genesis. So defining the purpose of marriage, it is fundamentally a path towards holiness. Yes? We are in the journey towards holiness. Keep in mind, for an Orthodox Christian, this should not be even a question. What is the purpose of your existence? Purification, illumination. Remember hashtag make the climb? Yes. If you ever forget the purpose of your, if somebody asks you, what's the meaning of my life? What's the purpose of my life? Hashtag make the climb. Purification, illumination, deification, which is summed up as holiness. Okay? Yes? We agree? So what does that mean? Extension of one's call consists of the following. It's the extension of one's call as a Christian. Being selfless, self-sacrificing, love, exemplifying Christ and his church, fundamentally. Working on one's salvation in conjunction with whom God has entrusted to you. Okay? That means that the two people who are coming together should come in agreement of what the purpose of life is. Okay? Why do you think the church says that, in order for the church to do a marriage, both of them should be orthodox? We may be asking, why does that matter? I mean, he's a great guy. She's a great girl, right? She reads the Bible. She knows Scripture. She's not Orthodox, right? Or he may not be Orthodox, but he's a great guy. Why not? Why does he have to convert? Why does she have to convert? Fundamentally because if you're not setting yourself up towards going to the same destination, problems will happen. Okay? God foresaw that. The church understands this reality, that it's not easy to live with another person, let alone especially when two people are on different boats. Right? Keep in mind, when we talk about marriage, it's not about two people being in one boat traveling together to one destination. That is not marriage. Marriage is two people in two separate boats traveling together towards holiness. There's a difference. Why? Because whether we like to admit it or not, whether we like it or not, we bring into marriage what we experienced when we were children. Our values, our morals, what our parents taught us, all of that, even their behaviors, all that is brought into marriage. Same thing with the other spouse as well. So in that sense, do I say that they are in two separate boats? Okay? To say that, hey, you know what? This is a behavior of your father. This is a behavior of your mother. Take it away. You're basically saying you have to change and become something that you're not. Right? So when we begin to point finger to the other spouse and say, hey, you have a problem, the very moment when we begin to do that, we're not looking at the things that we need to change. Right? We think that, and we always end up saying that too. The problem, oh, it's her. The problem is him. Right? If the other person corrects themselves, everything will be okay. That's not true. That's not true. So there are two different boats trying to figure out how to work towards holiness, traveling together. Moreover, some people end up going in that journey. Some people may be going too quick. And the other person may be behind, right? And the other person is saying, hey, come on, come quick, let's go. Let's travel. Come on, why are you so slow? Pick up the pace, right? In other words, the other person will get so frustrated and say, you know what? You don't know how to use this boat. Just jump into my boat. I'll just do the rest of the journey. That ends the marriage. The very moment you ask the spouse to get out of your boat and just come into my boat, that ends the marriage, because you're taking the individuality and everything about that person is and saying what your needs don't matter anymore. I decide what's best for you. So it's important that you're both traveling at the same pace. That means that you may have to slow down. You may have to come down to the level of your spouse and say, okay, where are we now? Okay? Are we going together? Is this comfortable for you? Okay? Am I making you uncomfortable? These are the questions we have to ask our spouse. Okay? That requires patience, humility, and fundamentally love. Okay? Christ, if he was, just imagine how frustrated Christ gets dealing with us. Okay? He could have easily said, you know what? I don't have to be this patient. I don't have to be this loving. I'm going to get rid of them completely. Boom. In 1 second, he could have destroyed us. But the extreme humility, as church fathers say, that he died on the cross for our salvation, shows the degree at which we should also show the love to our spouse. Keep in mind, what is the foundation of marriage? It is defined by the relationship with Christ, with his church. Every time the cross, you look at the cross, you should remember your marriage. Because the cross, when people think of the cross, they go, oh, suffering, suffering, suffering. No. No, suffering is part of it. But the cross, the church fathers say, is a symbol of love. It's the flag of love. That, when you look at the cross yells out, love, love, love. Right? But we only look at the suffering part. Because that's what we're caught up in. The news is caught up in the suffering. The news doesn't want to look at the love. Right? Because to love somebody, you have to take responsibility for yourself. You have to humble yourself. You have to detach yourself certain things from the brain. Right? The path towards holiness is difficult, but it's not impossible. Okay? As I mentioned in the previous sections, Joel Hutchins and Jake Hudson and our professor from seminary, Dr. David Ford, Mary Ford, wrote a book, a compilation of all the married saints of the Orthodox Church. Married, they had children, they were bakers, shoemakers, construction workers. They were living 9-to-5 jobs. And yet they were able to live a holy life. And they became saints in the church. Okay? These are not made up stories, these are real stories, even from the 19th century. It's possible. It's difficult, it's possible. Struggling against one's passions, evil inclinations. And this is where, if you are married or planning to get married, even if you're planning to get married, even before you found a spouse, find a spiritual father. Find a spiritual mother. Okay? Because it's important that you work on your passions first before you enter into marriage. If you're married and if you don't have a spiritual father or a guide for your marriage, find someone who is trained in the Orthodox tradition. Okay? Marriage is martyrdom. It's giving up one's self-will. On the day of your marriage, those who are married, you were crowned, right? You were crowned. And you wear that crown over your neck, remembering the crown that Christ put before getting onto the cross. The crown of martyrdom, right? A part of you dies. On the sacrament of marriage, I say this to premarital counseling couples. I say, on the day of your marriage, a part of you will die. A part of you will die, and it has to die. Which part? The selfish part of you. The selfish part of you will die, or it should die. And you will continue, and that selfish part will revive itself and show its head up over and over and over again throughout marriage, but you have to make sure that you put that person in check through confession, through Eucharist, through liturgy, through sacraments, through talking to your spiritual father. Does this make sense? So martyrdom is a continuous journey, so that this the crown that you received on the day of your marriage, you will be going to those 24 elders. Remember the 24 elders around the throne of God? You will be able to take that crown of martyrdom and throw it to God, saying, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. Marriage is a path towards holiness in that sense. And the martyrdom, crown of martyrdom, is given to you because you are taken up the path towards holiness. So working out marriage. Marriage is not for feeding one's self-interest. Those who seek constant pleasure, right? It's not for those who want security in life, okay? People say, right when I decided to remain as a celibate, living at the Aramana, my loved ones, cousins, aunties say, like, who'll take care of you when you're old? And I asked Andy, what if it's the other way around? What if she gets sick and I have to take care of her for the rest of my life? Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Right? As a priest, if I'm getting married and then my wife passes away, I cannot get remarried. What happens then? Right? So don't you feel lonely being by yourself? I know many married people who are lonely. Many married people who admit to feeling lonely. You could be around thousands of people around you, you can still feel lonely. Right? So loneliness is relative, my friends. Don't think that, the only way that I can feel that I'm part of something is through marriage. It's a lie. Okay? The devil is influencing your news and lying to you. Okay? So, those who want to marry because of societal pressures, religious, I say this to my youth, St. Thomas going out, and Helen knows about this. Do not get married because your parents pressure you. Do not get married because the culture dictates it. Please, please, please. And you can quote me on this. Okay? Tell your parents, Abey George said this. Tell your actions, Abey George said this. Do not get married because your parents force you to. Because I know many people who got married because their parents forced them to, and they're in worse condition than how they were before. Okay? You want to get married because you want to work on holiness. Okay? You want to work on climbing up the prison. That's why we get married. Okay? Marriage is meant for working on one's salvation, striving towards holiness, cultivating virtues. Okay? Working on intimacy with God. Okay? It's not just cultivating intimacy with one another, because when people get married, when two people get married, there's another person there who's being married too. Right? Who is that? Christ. It's a three-way relationship. It's not a two-way relationship. Right? Keep in mind the image of the boat. Right? You're both traveling towards the destination of holiness, towards Christ. We're meant to create a replica of heaven on earth through marriage. Those willing to live a saintly lives to help give birth and raise children as saints. You know, just about a word about, giving birth to children and raising children. I always say this to couples who have children. These children are not yours. And scandalous thing. They're not yours. They're God's. God has entrusted you with these kids. Okay? That means that you have to take responsibility not only for yourself, but for these kids as well. That means that you have to bring them to church. If you deprive them of God, in my opinion, that is abuse. If you deprive them of Sunday school, if you deprive them of the Eucharist, if you deprive them of any of the sacraments, that is spiritual abuse. Because God entrusted them to you. God will ask you, I wanted those kids to see me every Sunday. What did you do? You brought them to soccer? You brought them to tennis practice? You brought them to Super Bowl? He will ask you. We have to ask ourselves, what are we doing with our children? Because they are not yours. They are God's. They're entrusted to you. So, before we bring them to church, we have to make sure that we feel comfortable coming to church. Right? Because I know couples who would say, no, they're not going to say. They should be convinced about how important church is because of the way that you come to church, and how you worship, and how you offer yourself to worship. This is very important. Because kids learn not from what they hear, but what they see. Right? And somebody was sharing how they still remember their appachans and ammatis praying 4 o'clock in the middle of the night. Right? And that's the desire that we ought to have in our life as well, through worship and prayer. Marriage as martyrdom, as I just reiterated, as I mentioned before. The crowns are placed, and by the way, in the original Syriac tradition, it was real crowns that were placed. Okay? Similar to the bridegroom. Extreme humility. Keep in mind, this is not a regular normal human being like you and I. This is God that we're talking about. Fully God, fully man. This is what it means to be truly man. Meaning human. This is the image of what it means to be truly God and truly man. Father John Barrow, St. Vladimir's, always says this. Jesus Christ, as God, showed us how to become truly human. And as a human being, he showed us how we should become like God. Right? So this is the true human that we're supposed to imitate and become one with. All right, let's just shift gears for a moment. Okay, I have 10 more minutes, right?
Yep.
5 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. I will wrap it up in 10 minutes. Monasticism. What is monasticism? One of my uncles from my church said, monastics? What a waste of time. This is exactly what he said. People who waste their time. They could have done good things in the world by doing, social work or services, helping the poor, the needy. Them just being in somewhere far away in a mountain and praying, waste of time. This is what they said, quote unquote. But I don't blame that uncle because he may have his own understanding what monasticism is. So there are some common myths about monasticism which I want to talk about. Monks, common myth. Monks live a life of deprivation. They are deprived, right? They're not getting married. They don't have work. So they're deprived in so many ways. But keep in mind, deprivation is a very relative term, right? It's a very relative term. You can have all the things in your world, but you can still be deprived, right? I know individuals who have everything, okay? A house, great wife, great children, and they have opened up and said, I feel there's something missing in my life, and I'm having suicidal ideation. I have everything in my life, but still there's some kind of an emptiness within me. I don't know what that is. So deprivation is a relative term, right? To live a holy life, one needs to live a monastic life. That is also nonsense. To live a holy life, you don't have to become a monk, okay? This, like I said, monasticism and marriage are two paths, parallel paths, that leads to the same destination. And I would argue the life of marriage is difficult more than monasticism. The monastic life is easier. Okay? Why? Why am I saying that? Because when you're living as a monk, and I'm not talking about a monk priest, I'm talking about a monk, you're not entrusted to the souls of other people. You're working out your own salvation, working on your own asceticism, and you're not responsible for anyone else. But in marriage, that's not the case. You're entrusted with your spouse and also children as well. See, that's why celibates don't get, being a celibate, you don't get a sacrament. There is no sacrament of celibacy, but there is a sacrament of marriage. Because God realizes that to live a holy life in the sacrament of, in the path of marriage, you need greater grace of God. Right? So all monks are considered clergy. That's also wrong. Okay? Remember, like for example, Tirumani wears the masan himself. Why do you do him there for some reason? Because I feel like every time you do prayer, he shows up there, right? So hit the masan himself with the cross, the tuni, right? It's not a clergy attire. It's a monk's schema. It's the monk's I guess what's the term that I would call it? Call it cloth. Monk's cloth that they wear as a sign that he is a monk. Okay? People think that the person who wears that, they're all Tirumani's. No, that's not true. Right? In fact, there are people who are monastics who have the masan himself who are not even allowed to enter into the altar. Okay? So just because they wear the masan himself doesn't mean that they are clergy. Monasticism is a life that you're entering into in which you take a vow and say, I'm going to be part of this monastic community to work on my salvation, along with the other people who are living there. Okay? So, once married cannot accept monasticism. No, that's not true. In the early church, you know how it was? Married people, when the children get married off and everything, you know what the husbands and wives would do? The husband would go be part of a monastery, and the wife would go be part of a nunnery. And they would work on their salvation to the end of their life. And in conjunction with their agreement, they would agree to this before they do. Right? Not everybody didn't do that, but that is possible as well. They would take up the monastic tonsure. I don't know how many of you all know that Bishop Michael, our guru at St. Tikhon Seminary, Bishop Michael, he's Archbishop Michael now in charge of New Jersey, New York diocese. He was once married, and his wife passed away in a car accident. And he remained to not get married. He remained as a celibate, and then he was chosen as to be a bishop. And now he's Archbishop in New York and New Jersey area of the OCA Church. So these are some myths that we have about monasticism. What is the purpose of monasticism? Monasticism is fundamentally a life of asceticism, rooted in prayer. Can somebody tell me what asceticism is? I've been using that word over and over again. Yes?
Like exercise.
Mm-hmm. Speak more. Is it getting on the treadmill or?
Exercise
Yes, good, excellent. So it's spiritual labor or spiritual exercise, as Jason said. So what does that mean? It means that you are spending time in prayer, spiritually exercising your muscles, and it comes from the word askesis, which means spiritual labor. It means that you're working on anger. You're working on your patience. You're working on loving people unconditionally. You're working on trying to be merciful. You're working on that over and over and over again through prayer, through fasting, through the liturgy, through the sacraments. And the monastics, because they have dedicated their entire lives on asceticism, they become the so-called experts, right, in asceticism. That's why I think I mentioned to you about Monatos, right? Monatos has 22 monasteries and over thousands of monks, right, living there and working on their asceticism. Many married people come there for guidance and ask the questions about thoughts, about desires, about loving people unconditionally, all these different questions, because they have the proper training and expertise in that field, right? So that doesn't mean that only married people monastics are expertise. No, that's not true. There are many married people who live saintly lives, who work on their salvation, who live an ascetical life as well, but they don't show it off. They're the ones who don't even let other people know that they're fasting. They're the ones who don't let other people know that they're observing Lent, right? So the purpose of monasticism is to live the life in Christ. We're basically working on salvation, right? So keep in mind, remember the story of Abraham and Sodom and Gomorrah. Yes? We remember that? He said, if you could find 10 people that are good, right, I will not destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham, he looked around, couldn't find 10 people, goes up to God saying, God, please don't destroy us, please don't destroy us, please don't destroy us. He became a mediator between God and man. The monastics do that unceasingly. Okay, the monastics are basically saying, please don't destroy us, have mercy on us, like Abraham. Right? Unceasingly. Throughout their life, they pray, Lord have mercy. They're not only praying for them. Okay, they're not being selfish by being in a monastery somewhere far and praying for them. No, they're not only doing that. They're praying for the entire universe. Monathos gets many prayer requests. Many prayer requests through email, through mail, fax, whatever you want to call it. For many people who are undergoing many suffering in life. So they pray for those individuals. So I'll end it with this diagram here. One road is not greater than the other. Okay? Foundation for all paths, the 3 paths that I'm putting in front of you. Marriage, monasticism, and celibacy, / community living. In the sense where, for example, we have a so-called monastic community at the Almana. I live with Trimeni and there are 2 other Achans. It's not a monastery per se, but it's basically celibates living together in a community. Okay? And after living there for the past 6 years now, I would say that this path, all the struggles in this path, is also in here and also in here. It's the same thing. The same struggles are there. Right? But we all work towards holiness through asceticism. Each road has its own struggles and advantages. What works for one does not work for the other. All roads have equal opportunity to experience holiness and sainthood, which is very important. Okay? To be a saint means what? Fill in the blanks. What is the definition of a saint? A person who sees God. You have equal opportunity for all paths, but you have to make sure that the path that you choose is best for your salvation. And how do you know that? You work it out with your spiritual father, which is spiritual God, and ask them, with the help of their guidance and direction, which path is best for you. And of course, it doesn't end there. As you continue on your journey towards holiness, you continue to work with your spiritual guide for help in that sense. So I'm going to stop here. Is that okay?